I didn't have a PlayStation 2 growing up, which meant a wide variety of great games passed me by. I've recently decided to rectify this, not only with Sony's second console, but with all platforms. I found to no great surprise a plethora of classics that I'd missed. One such game was Silent Hill 2. Now I know, Silent Hill 2 isn't exactly an exclusive, but the PlayStation 2's catalogue of classics led to an untapped goldmine of games to play. So here we are. Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror video game that was released in 2001 to high critical acclaim. The only thing I knew about the Silent Hill franchise was that it was one. I knew nothing of its characters aside from the ominous depiction of Pyramid Head, who was a notable villain in video game and horror culture. I went into this game completely blind. I knew nothing of Silent Hill, and I am eternally thankful for that. So if you haven't yet played this masterpiece, I will discuss its game story and its impact, so here is your spoiler warning. I'm gonna let the proverbial cat out of the bag and state I played the HD collection. Accessibility was at the forefront for this decision, and I saw it cheap on the Xbox store. I discovered that the HD collection is subpar when compared to the original. After my playthrough, I took a deeper dive into comparing the two. I will say, the original looks much better, but from a blind perspective, the HD collection was absolutely palatable. Yes, the fog was less, but I still had such a lonely experience exploring the streets of Silent Hill. Yes, some textures popped in every now and then, but I took little to no notice. Yeah, Comic Sans. There was one pretty substantial drawback, however, and that was with the videotape scene. I had a hard time discerning what was actually happening towards the end. I mean, I saw that James killed Mary in the tape, but it was hard to make out. I thought this ambiguity was intentional from the story's perspective. I didn't realise that this dumb TV overlay cut off half the image. Now, when looking at the HD collection, Silent Hill 3 looks to be worse off, so perhaps when I get around to playing that, I'll find another platform. So with that, I finally played Silent Hill 2. It only took me 20 years. Starting off, I found the control scheme super uncomfortable, and my frustration grew. Fair to say, but I suck at tank controls. Navigation was hard enough. Throw bloodthirsty flesh boys into the mix. I really struggled early on. That was until I stumbled upon 2D controls. I was instantly relieved, and my mind switched away from my hands and back to the game. With the control scheme figured out, I found the game to be far more enjoyable. I initially played with headphones, however, I would not recommend this, as sounds don't align with where they are on screen. I doubled back on many occasions because a lying figure sounded like it was behind me, only to have it somewhere else entirely. I took off the headphones and my immersion grew. I loved exploring the township of Silent Hill. I felt a strange sense of peace and unease getting lost. I knew that everything was the intended path. What I grew to love throughout exploring was finding the beauty in this fucked up world. Some innocent graffiti on the wall, even the lived-in apartments that felt so real. I was there. The puzzles in the game were satisfying, all of them fun to figure out. The standout puzzles for me were the 3-coin puzzle and the 6 hanging men, all ambiguous but giving you just enough to figure them out. I was completely stumped with the rotating cube puzzle, and it took me ages to stumble upon the result. What can I say about this game and its story? If you've played it, you know. Silent Hill 2 will burrow deep in your mind and stay there. I know it has for me. Everything in Silent Hill 2 is interconnected, and that's what makes it beautiful. The unraveling narrative blew me away. Every encounter you remember because they're just so bizarre, but upon reflection turn out to be completely sound and reasonable. I will never forget this story because, while infinitely deep, it's also extremely simple and relatable. A story of betrayal and depression and loss and bullying and abuse and murder and forgiveness. Silent Hill 2 has made me ponder on the whole journey I had just undertaken. Not since Shadow of the Colossus or The Last of Us have I felt so profoundly impacted by a game's narrative. But I think the best aspect of Silent Hill 2 is that the game never implies anything as right or wrong. It never antagonizes you, but it expertly offers itself to you to antagonize yourself. It lets you be the judge, does not distort or lie. Silent Hill 2 tells the truth. I think that is the real beauty of Silent Hill 2. No ham-fisted bullcrap about right or wrong. This game trusts you to want to understand it. A lot of this subtlety is lost in the world of video games now. Silent Hill 2 is special. One of the best things about Silent Hill 2 is its characters. Every character is tragic. They're all consumed by things they couldn't control. This is why they are brought to Silent Hill, to confront their burdens, mostly with dire consequences. Angela being my favourite and perhaps the most tragic character of Silent Hill 2. Her delivery is haunting, and that knife, well, I held onto it, knowing that she wanted to use it to end her life. I felt I was holding onto a piece of her. The way she exclaims, "Lost?"
Lost?
As if to say, how the hell could you be lost? This subtly told me that everything in this experience would be intentional and that I should trust the journey. I don't truly believe that she deserved to come to Silent Hill. She killed her father and brother out of self-defense. However, I believe justifiably so, due to the torment she endured during childhood. She was brought to Silent Hill not because of her actions, but because she hasn't actually taken ownership of her thoughts and begun healing, and ultimately it consumes her. Throughout Silent Hill, we get subtle tells that each character's experience is different. At first, Eddie proclaims seeing no monsters. The room with Abstract Daddy is a window to Angela's Silent Hill, and the sequence is ever stronger for it. And the staircase scene cements this prospect as Angela states, "It's like this all the time. This is her Silent Hill. This is her hell. And it killed her." As far as introductions go, Eddie's is rememberable. Hurling into the toilet, which I initially thought was a new enemy type, the distant vomiting was unsettling to say the least. Eddie seemed relatively normal on the onset, eating pizza and chatting with Laura. A hint at his mind's fixation as he proclaims no one will forgive him if he apologizes. Eddie's beaten down until he snaps, killing a dog and shooting his tormentor. Eddie's transition into darkness was harrowing, and I was thrown through a loop during the Meat Locker fight. A thoughtless James taunts Eddie, his demise inevitable. While I shared James's disgust, I wouldn't have provoked him. Perhaps, and I'm speculating here, James needed to kill Eddie as to not go down the same path and achieve a different outcome. Every character is selfishly on their own journey of discovery. Then we have James Sunderland, an innocuous name that held no meaning to me, forever transformed into one of the most dynamic characters I've ever witnessed. And it's all thanks to this little game, Silent Hill 2. Protagonists in games have a troubling role. They're either a blank slate to be a surrogate for the player, or have to be interesting and intriguing even remarkable in their own right to drive the narrative forward. James is different. He is initially boring and generic. I think intentionally so, to push a false narrative of sanity. The letter from his late wife Mary is met with confusion, but also intrigue. He knows she's dead. However, seeds of doubt shine through with the hope of a love returned. I want to stress, I shared James's curiosity and thought like him that the troubles lied within Silent Hill, not within himself. As we progress through the game, his curiosity fades and he seemingly gets captivated by the lure of Silent Hill. This, for me, was prevalent in the historical society. Deep, dark holes. James just jumps. He's transfixed. He isn't skeptical. He is consumed. It seems utterly abnormal. I think deep down, he isn't really searching for Mary. The historical society and prison represent his memory, and the holes represent his deeper dive into the void that is depression and guilt. I felt for James. Twisted and dark, flawed as he was, I wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to find Mary, to find peace. The game has space to allow you to sentence James to whatever outcome you see fit, which is fitting considering the ending I got, but more on that later. Every good protagonist needs an equally compelling antagonist, and while I believe Silent Hill, the town, is actually the main antagonist, it's hard to dispute the importance of Pyramid Head. This thing is terrifying. After the first encounter, I felt extreme unease. I knew he was somewhere in the apartments. Such a fucked up introduction that hits so much harder than a jump scare ever could. On the roof scared the shit out of me. The telling scratch of his weapon on the ground. Bloody hell. I went through the rest of the game with a strong unease, thinking he could show up at any time. The revelation that he is a figment of James's imagination blew my mind. He was the vessel that would bring James back to the truth. He is the manifestation of James's guilt and desire for punishment for previous discretions. After this realization, the heads commit suicide after fulfilling their objective. I don't need you anymore. Pyramid Head is the connection between you and James. The fear we have of Pyramid Head as players is reflected as James's fear for the truth, that he's a murderer. Laura, on the other hand, embodies innocence. Like James, she is also looking for Mary. Although not initially forthcoming with information, her ambiguity had me hooked. Who was this little brat and what did she know of Mary? I feel that Laura is another conduit for truth. She leads you forward. She has a solid connection with Mary that validates her series of events. The seed of doubt grows in your mind. The letter she gives you has many effects. It abolishes the falsehood that Mary died 3 years ago, but it's also a tragic reminder of innocence not seeing meaning in writing. In the end, Laura mistakes Mary's letter. I'm far away now, in a quiet, beautiful place, to mean in Silent Hill, not in heaven. She doesn't know Mary is dead. It hurt even more knowing she drew this innocently while I read it. Not directly affected by the darkness that is Silent Hill, she doesn't see monsters and seems to be joyously traversing through the town. She does fall for its misgivings nonetheless, her innocence tainted with the revelation of Mary's death. Her hatred of James is seething, which is why I was a little confused when they're left together at the end. Maria spends the most time with you out of any of the other characters in Silent Hill 2. And for me, I think she's a figment of James's imagination, introduced at James and Mary's special place, Rosewater Park. Maria's uncanny resemblance to Mary fooled even me. Alluring and sexual in nature, Maria hints at a better life with her. There is constant tension. Maria leading James multiple times to the truth. She dies several times, only to be brought back to seduce James some more. She is showing him that she isn't real. He is fighting her away, but also letting her in to shadow him from the truth. I feel Maria's death is James reliving Mary's murder, but disconnecting it from reality and projecting this torment onto Maria, a figment created to channel the madness away, sparking the idea that the thought of Mary in your head is better than the truth. The truth is death and despair. The truth is murder and sickness and unhappiness. I, however, didn't really buy into it. I was mainly curious of where Mary was and if she was still alive. And that brings us to Mary, the most important character in Silent Hill 2. Her letter brings us to Silent Hill, and her punishment is reflected back at us through the town. Mary defined Silent Hill. Mary is young and falls ill, winding up in hospital where she befriends Laura. For 3 years, she is riddled with an unknown illness. The illness is etched in James's mind as the beginning of the end of her death. After the ongoing treatment, Mary is released and sent home from hospital. However, the illness does not subside. James takes matters into his own hands and suffocates her with a pillow. Although it was a little hard to tell initially, their last good memory is that of Silent Hill. It's little wonder that becomes their special place. However, she isn't perfect. She was abusive herself. This can be seen in the hallway before the final encounter. She lashes out at James when he brings flowers, protesting she is too disgusting to deserve them. She later recoils and pleads James to stay, to not leave. She begs for him to reassure her she won't die. This broke my heart.
Stay with me. Don't leave me alone. I didn't mean what I said. Please, James. Tell me I'll be okay. Tell me I'm not going to die. Help me.
The tug of war with these revelations only compacted my growing despair for this ill-fated couple. These may seem more like facts than thoughts, but I think she is deliberately shown this way. The game's main function, from a streamlined perspective, is to find Mary, but there are so many more troubles along the way. Mary is essentially a red herring. Truth is the main point of the game. I think of Silent Hill as much a character as anyone else. Silent Hill is the vehicle for each character to come to terms with their respective traumas. Silent Hill calls the people to it. Angela isn't in Silent Hill because she killed her father. She's in Silent Hill because she hasn't begun healing. Eddie is in Silent Hill because of his troubled past. I think Silent Hill seems conscious. Silent Hill seems alive. Perhaps then, the camera angles could be seen as Silent Hill's eyes, watching your every move. Don't know if there's any validity to this, but it definitely made my playthrough all the more daunting thinking of it in this light. There were many moments throughout the game, especially drawing towards the conclusion, where I just had to stand there and think for a moment about what had just taken place. All the way from the meat locker room fight to the VHS tape, to the corrupted Lakeview Hotel, to the burning staircase, to the long walk before the ending and after the ending itself. I got the leave ending and only found out during the game that there were multiple. For me, the leave ending made sense. James survives because he forgives himself. It feels rewarding, as the demons you have faced during the game are physical and manifest to keep you in the town of Silent Hill. It's also fitting as Mary forgives him, so I feel James owes it to her to move on and forgive himself. Silent Hill 2. It's more than a blood and gore combat-driven horror game. It's special. Silent Hill 2 is above all else a love story. a tragic love story. It's a gut-wrenching testament to the love that two people can have for each other. It's a touching story about a man and his wife, caught up in the remnants of their own demise, just unable to see it first. At face value, it may seem hard to accept this as love. Every gore-infested ghoul flailing is actually James's state of mind. Every awkward conversation a riddle, soaked in double meaning. The dark hallways with locked doors, symbolism of love's betrayal and misdirection. And that brings us back to the letter. The town wasn't this way before. I'm in our special place. Just a reminder that Silent Hill 2 is an entirely psychological game. Maybe, just maybe, this was their happy place. But in the midst of such despair, the monsters thrive. Everything is an ode to the profound effect our closest relationships can diminish to. I went in thinking this would be a solid survival horror game, but it's much, much more than that. Silent Hill 2 will stay with me. Thanks for watching. I would love to share your thoughts on this masterpiece. Drop a comment below. And if you liked the video and would like to see more content like this, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Till next time when I finally play something else.